Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hi, howdy do.
So we have insomnia cookies down here in the Springs now, just opened.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Week,
how are they?
Which is bad for everybody. Bad for me.
Because they deliver all night?
Till 1 a.m.
Oh. Well, that's hardly
all
insomnia.
I know, that's what my son and his friend were like, I expect to go to like 6 a.m. or something like, or just be open midnight to noon if it's called. So yeah, no. But even for me, I can still get a fix by 1 a.m. So that's better than most places.
And so have you had them yet?
Yes, I ordered them last night. So we're supposed to be teenagers coming over. And then one of them was like, I don't want to drive. So they went to his house instead. Oh. And I was like, well, now I have 18 cookies.
Oh, okay.
Oh, darn. I can freeze them if I need to. But here's the thing about them. Everybody talked about Sasquatch cookies during COVID. And they would deliver to you. So that was the big thing with them, of course. And I got them. And I was just so disappointed. They were not good. They were not soft.
Oh.
I like a soft cookie.
I have had Sasquatch cookies since then. Yeah. Like, went in and got them. And I liked them, but
I did not like them.
I
didn't think the flavor was great. I didn't like the texture.
What are those super expensive bougie cookies?
I don't know.
You go in and some are supposed to be served warm and some are supposed to be served cold.
Oh, crumble.
Crumble.
Those giant cookies.
They don't have any flavor. They just taste like sugar to me.
Sugar. Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I cutting off my left arm for a cookie that's not that good?
They're also open late. Not as late as Insomnia, but.
So anyway, what'd you get from Insomnia?
So I got, because they had a deal. So it was buy 12, get 6 free. And so I ended up with 18 cookies.
I would totally do that.
But they were their classic cookies, which they have a lot of varieties, including a bunch of vegan ones.
Ooh.
Yes, that are classic. So they're not, They don't cost extra or anything, which is unusual for some places, you know. So we got vegan confetti cake because it didn't come in non-vegan anyway. And then oatmeal, raisin, and chocolate chunk, and the one with M&Ms in it instead of chocolate chips, and then like double chocolate and a snickerdoodle. So I have not tried them all. But I got myself one that wasn't a classic in addition to those. I got a s'mores one. And it was like a chocolate cookie, and it had marshmallows and graham crackers. And it was good, but it was a lot. I regretted life after that.
It's like when you get if you don't know what you're doing and you go into Hertz Donuts and order an apple fritter. They're good, but they're the size of your head.
We have gotten one that way before.
You just need one for like a family of 4.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Every once in a while I crave one of those. But my problem is the places that do apple fritters. I don't know about Hertz. But like I can get a apple fritter from Come and Go down the street.
Yep.
But it's clearly from a mix, right? And then sometimes you get one that has no apple chunks in it. And then
that makes me very sad.
But yeah, so it was really good. And I tried half of an oatmeal one later after I recovered. But you can also get ice cream. Which would really be my downfall is being able to order ice cream. Because that's the thing for me. I love ice cream.
Yeah.
And that was good. It was ice cream. And you can get buttercream to dip it in. I got buttercream to dip. And it was good. And in fact, it wasn't pure sugar like buttercream can be.
Right.
So it was pretty good.
Speaking of cravings, I went to the farmer's market a couple of weeks ago and got a La Baguette cinnamon roll with raisins. I can only eat about one a year because they're made, if for anybody who doesn't know, they're made with croissant dough. Oh, fuck, they're so good. They have the right amount of crispy on the outside and they're just buttery and cinnamon-y. Cinnamon-y.
Oh, so, and those are La Baguette ones?
Yes.
How come you have to go to the farmer's market? There's a La Baguette right there.
There is, but I was going to the farmer's market. It's kind of a thing in my head. Gotcha. Like I said, I do it once a year. I go...
Just like when we record the podcast, then my brain expects barbecue afterwards because often we will go to Rudy's after.
Whereas often I go home and it's like, I'm going to have cereal.
Right? Now Jeffrey knows now that my brain is like barbecue time. Because we did it a couple times and now my brain has decided that's it.
I did offer, I said, what does anybody want for dinner tonight? And of course I got blank stares. So I had said, well, and Joe said, well, we can just scrounge. And I said, well, I was thinking I could pick up chicken wings. He goes, ooh. And then he goes, well, let's wait and see what time you finish. It varies.
You can get chicken wings anytime.
Yes.
Till like 2 a.m. 2 a.m.? I think so. Anyway.
But perhaps not from the place I want to get them now.
That's true. Is it fucking wing?
Fucking wing is awesome, but so is 92 chicken. So.
Yeah. We saw Indiana Jones.
How was it?
I mean, I liked it, but...
We have to talk about when we're going to go see the Barbie movie, because we have to let people know.
It's apparently actually really good. My son and his friends went. Because one of the friends was... I'm buying tickets. And they were like, okay. They didn't know for what. And so he's like, we're either seeing Oppenheimer or Barbie. And I was like, you're supposed to do a double feature. It's called Barbenheimer. Whatever. Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
So anyway, they saw it and he was like, it's actually pretty good. I've been hearing it's hysterical.
That's what I have been expecting it to be hysterical from the outset. I will warn you, I'm going to wear pink. I'm going to wear a lot of pink.
I don't own.
I know.
I don't know. Because I thought about it and I was like, I feel like you have to go full Barbie to go, but I don't.
You could be black leather Barbie.
Awesome.
You could be rockabilly Barbie.
Yeah, it's true. That's a lot of work.
So I invited Miss Amy. I said, so people I know who went and saw Cats together are going to go see Barbie. And she goes, oh my God, I'd love to. And I started laughing and she goes, holy shit, I hope you were going to invite me. I said, in fact, that was going to be the next sentence out of my mouth. But I said, I'm going to wear pink. None of it will probably match because I'm not that coordinated. But she said to me, is Shannon going to wear pink? And I went, huh, I don't think so.
I might if I had some.
Yeah.
But I'm not buying pink just for the Barbie movie.
I would not either.
Yeah, so my daughter wants to go, and what she said, she was talking about it when we went to Indiana Jones, because they had a giant Barbie box that you could step into and get your pictures like you're a Barbie, and she made my husband get in it and take pictures of him. It made her very happy. And she was like, so nobody wants to go see the Barbie movie, right? And I said, oh, well, I was going to go see it and make fun of it with some friends, probably. I said, but I like Margot Robbie, so
yeah,
probably. And she was like, I want to go see it, but by myself. Can somebody drop me off by myself? Okay. My husband said he would. I will take you if you want. Nice. Like, I'll go see it with you if you want. No, I just want to see it by myself. Okay. None of your friends want to see it? No. Okay.
I had somebody go to me, ew, you want to watch that? And I was like, are you kidding me? Have you seen the previews? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, it's over the top, and I love Margot Robbie, and...
They're talking about it in one of my horror groups.
Wow.
Because it was fun. And there's all the... I'm going to share. I didn't share it this morning, but there's all these things about... Somebody took, reviews from, men who were being dicks. They're just trying to turn everybody gay now. Okay. There's one male character in the movie. What are you even talking about, dude? Don't be so mad. So, and they took those reviews and they put them on the poster for fun, right?
I love
going to share some of those.
I was just like, how can you be dismissive of something that if you haven't even watched the preview, you just heard the name and went, ugh.
We watched Battleship when it came out and it was quite entertaining.
I went and saw Cats. That was a fucking dreadful movie, but I laughed my ass off.
It was terrible.
The entire thing. However long it was, if it was 90 minutes, I laughed 89 of them.
Yeah. So, it looks entertaining.
Yes. All right. So we should get started because
mine is long.
Yours is long. Yours is very serious, and I'm back with mayhem. I feel like I haven't done just pure mayhem in a while.
I looked up Hogzilla to see if Hogzilla was a real thing, and it was, but I couldn't make a whole story out of it. And then I was like, well, I want to find other crazy animal hybrids. I sunk way too much time into trying to so I could do a report on these weren't mythic creatures, they were real. But yes, Hogzilla, what was he? He was a combo between a wild hog and then a domestic pig or something. Oh. He was huge, 750 pounds or something. I saw one thing that said 1,000 and one that said 750.
Pigs get big.
Well, he was bigger then.
Yes.
Because of for whatever reason, that combo. But yeah, my uncle had a couple pigs for a while that he was fattening up to eat that somebody gave him free, and they were huge, and they had this little sty, each of them, and they just sat in there and had sat down over their eyes. And I was like, I want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
So, but yeah. And he was just chilling until he could find somebody who would slaughter the poor hogs.
Oh.
He wasn't mean to them or anything. He wasn't nice to people, but he was great to animals.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about him like he's dead. He's not dead. He's just dead to me. But anyway.
Same difference.
So I'm doing a couple 1996 rampage massacres, and you'll see why they're tied together. I was just going to do one. I went to do Port Arthur, which was in Australia. And then talking about that, it couldn't help but be traced back to the one I'm going to cover first. So, in a 2-month period, 2 major rampage shootings took place in 2 different countries that shook up the populace and resulted in major changes to gun laws in those places. We hear more about one than the other. That would be Port Arthur, but the citizenry of both countries supported each other through the time period after the shooting. And one of the things that always stands out to me about these sort of rampage massacres is when you hear about it, it feels like it went on forever, right? Mm-hmm. It feels like, because there's just so much. There's so much brutality. It's so many people killed in these. And they're actually over in like seconds to minutes.
Yeah.
Depending on the shooting. Like parts of, I'm going to describe one part and it was 15 seconds.
Wow. And
there's no way it feels like that. Just the sheer amount of carnage that can occur in just a few minutes is absolutely horrifying. And I think that another reason these are always so much more horrifying to people is it's just, there's somewhere they're supposed to be safe. There's somewhere where you're not supposed to be looking around. They're not walking through a dangerous neighborhood. They're not.
Oh, they're in church or.
Right.
Going to school.
Yes. So first I'm covering the Dunblane massacre. At about 9:30 a.m. on March 13th, 1996, 43-year-old Thomas Hamilton arrived at Dunblane Primary School in Dunblane, Scotland. He parked his van and cut the telephone cables, which shut down phone services to the houses around the school, ensuring no one hearing or seeing anything would be able to contact the police. So very purposeful this guy.
Yeah, that's not.
This isn't a teenager. This is a 43-year-old man.
Yeah, and this is planned, not.
Mm-hmm. On his person, he carried weapons he had acquired legally, 2 9mm Browning HP pistols and 2 Smith & Wesson M19 357 revolvers. He had 743 rounds of ammunition on him.
Good God.
He fired several shots into the girls' bathroom in another room, then stepped into the school gymnasium, where a primary 1 class of 28 students, all 5 and 6 years old, was getting ready for their PE period. Opening fire immediately, he took out the 3 adults present first. And I don't think they said that he just kind of randomly shot. It's just these are the 3 larger people out of a bunch of 5 and 6-year-olds. And the first one killed was the primary 1 teacher, Gwen Mayer, who, she's so adorable. There's pictures and I was like, of course she was a primary teacher. She was, I'll post a couple pictures of her. She tried to protect her students. And the PE teacher, Eileen Herod, who had approached him as he entered, was shot in her arms and chest and took cover in a storage cupboard. An assistant teacher named Mary Blake took shots to the head and each of her legs, but she was still alive, was able to get herself and 4 injured children into that cupboard as well. Along with Ms. Mayer, 1 student was killed during that initial volley, with many others injured. At this point, it was determined he had fired 29 shots. He just came in and sprayed.
I can't even imagine being shot in the head
and
having the presence of mind to still try to protect other people.
Yeah. Oh, both of these stories, there's so much. There's, people. I mean, this one, the adults are gone. Kids don't.
Right. Well, yeah.
But in the next one, there was a lot to it, and I really trimmed it down a lot. But I had to throw out a couple stories of people trying to protect other people. He then walked systematically around the gym, shooting already injured children. There was the group that, the bullets had plowed through them, but they weren't dead. And those still fleeing him. It took 30 more shots. And some of these were delivered as he stood over those injured children. He stood over them and shot them point blank, the ones already lying on the ground.
Oh my God.
Yeah. A primary 7 student walking by the gym heard the noise and poked his head inside. Hamilton fired at him, but the student was only hit by shattering glass, not a bullet, and he ran away. He fired 24 more shots around the gym and through a window, then stepped outside to shoot an adult outside. Missed him. They were like, they think he was shooting at this person who was walking across like the grass. Hamilton opened an exit door, fired 4 more times, then stepped out and shot more toward the library where he injured adult Grace Tweddle, like it went through the wall.
Oh, God.
Teacher Catherine Gordon, who was in a separate mobile classroom, realized what was happening in the gym and made her primary 7 students get down on the floor, saving their lives when seconds later, 9 shots tore through the classroom and one went right through the back of a seat where a student had been sitting before she made him hit the ground.
And this was before, what year was this, did you say?
1996, the year I graduated and got married.
So this was before people were...
Cell phones and stuff
Well,
like that.
no, I'm thinking it's before, sadly, shootings became so common. And now there's kind of, you have it in your head, okay, if someone starts shooting, here's what you do. This was on the fly. This was...
Well, and here's the thing. Even then, they had been happening, but it didn't get big until Columbine.
Right.
And I don't remember what year that was exactly, but it was only a few years after this, because I know where I was working when it happened, because I remember us sitting there listening on the radio to the news about it. He never spoke a word through his attack. Just walked in, stone-faced, and just shot all these kids. Walking back into the gym, he took out a revolver, stuck the barrel in his mouth, and killed himself. 4 minutes had passed since he stepped into the gymnasium. This all happened in 4 minutes.
Wow.
1 adult was dead, 3 injured, and 15 of the 28 students lay dead on the ground with more injured. The assistant head mistress had heard the screams and saw what she thought were cartridges on the ground, so she reported to the headmaster that she thought there was a shooter. And he called the police at 9:41 a.m. before heading toward the gymnasium. But by the time he got there, Hamilton had already shot himself. So he took in what was happening, ran back to the office, told the deputy head mistress to call again and ask for an ambulance. And that was at 9:43 a.m.
Wow.
An ambulance arrived at 9:57 a.m., followed by health workers from multiple locations who'd been alerted. The injured were all at hospitals by 11:10 a.m., with 1 additional student dying in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and then the rest would live. When police looked into the motivation of the killer, it was discovered that he had been ousted as a scout leader in 1974 due to complaints of inappropriate behavior with the boys. He was perv, such as taking photographs of semi-nude boys and forcing boys to sleep next to him on scouting trips. Now,
this was in 1974.
And so this happened in 96.
22 years earlier.
Well, it builds.
Yeah.
He continued trying to rejoin various scout groups and even organized multiple boys' clubs of his own, which were popular at first. But then more weird things were happening. There were more complaints. And it resulted in rumors spreading around him. And this wasn't a big town. So people were talking about him. And there were additional complaints. They started calling him Mr. Creepy. In 1991, an official complaint was filed against him for violating the Children and Young Persons Act of 1937, which included assault. But after an investigation, no action was taken.
Okay.
According to laws already in place, the type of complaint made against him would have allowed for authorities to remove his firearms certificate, but since they didn't pursue anything, they also didn't remove that. But they were familiar with him and knew that there were all these things being said about him. He was pissed off. In letters to Queen Elizabeth II and MP Michael Forsyth, he claimed that he was being persecuted unfairly. Yes, he went all the way up. And that it had shut down his business in 1993. What caused him to that day go into a school full of children, though? I mean, again, that was 1993. 3 years later.
Yeah.
I don't know if he got it. They don't know. Because he was dead. He killed himself. You never get answers out of these fuckers.
No, they don't always leave a nice typed note explaining things in detail.
In a journal. So, whatever made him go that day. Nobody knows. But, he was sighted right before he drove there, just scraping ice off his just a normal thing off his windshield there. And then he drove to the school and did all this so systematically. He was cremated in a different city. Nobody in that city would touch anything about him at that point. A gun control advocacy group called the Gun Control Network, which included at least one of the fathers of the victims, started. A group of mothers from town created a petition called the Snowdrop Campaign, which ultimately garnered over 1 million signatures before making its way to Parliament. It is considered one of the most successful grassroots campaigns in the UK to this date. Prime Minister John Major introduced the Firearms Amendment Act of 97, banning all but .22 caliber handguns, which were still allowed in clubs for target shooting in England, Scotland, and Wales. When Tony Blair took over, he introduced the Firearms Amendment No. 2 Act of 1997, which also banned .22s. Only historic weapons such as muzzle loaders remained legal, as well as long-barreled weapons. A buyback program was instituted with the surrendering of 162,000 guns willingly and 700 tons of ammo. And there, the guns were used for hunting, sport shooting, that sort of thing. Individuals can apply to own guns for sport shooting, but must go through mental health checks, and no one can purchase a handgun for self-defense. Like, that is not a valid reason to request a gun, which I don't love that. But
yep,
I found that that's common in other countries is nope, you can get it for sport shooting, but not for self-defense. They also examined and approved their policies on adult access to schools. The gym was torn down and made into a memorial. This was the worst mass killing in the UK and the last school shooting to occur there.
Wow.
So now Port Arthur massacre, the one I was originally going to cover. And you'll see why they're tied together. On April 28th, 1996, another one was mid-March, as Dunblane still reeled from what had happened there, an even more shocking crime occurred in Tasmania at the site of a historic penal colony in Port Arthur. The perpetrator in this case was a 29-year-old man named Martin Bryant. Bryant had a troubled youth and had, as an adult, applied for a disability pension. He was found to be a harm risk with a note attached to his pension application after the assessment saying, quote, "Father protects him from any occasion which might upset him as he continually threatens violence. Martin tells me he would like to go around shooting people. It would be unsafe to allow Martin out of his parents' control." Yet he did live out of their control, though his mother did apply for a guardianship order, which she was granted, but this was only to control a large sum of money he'd come into when a close friend died in a car accident with him and left him $550,000 Australian. She'd won the lottery. She was a lottery heiress.
Oh.
So I don't know if that means she won it or her parent. He was also left a farm property he'd bought with her. There's a whole story about these two. Like, it could be a whole fucked up book on its own. So I'm bare bonesing it here. He sold that property for $143,000. There we go. He lived independently in the friend's old mansion, which she'd been left after family members died. Bryant was found to have diminished intellectual capacity with an IQ of 66, which was equated with that of an 11-year-old. Though also found to have conduct disorder, ADHD, and Asperger's, he was not found to have a mood disorder and was therefore not considered mentally ill. He was known for shooting tourists and neighborhood dogs with an air gun and to otherwise harm animals.
I'm thinking you really don't want someone shooting tourists.
Yeah, like there was a farm stand or something nearby, and he just walk over there and shoot him with the air gun.
Because really, that spreads. I mean, most places, not every place, most places would like to encourage tourists to visit and spend their money.
It was just, my thing that I see with these all the time is even when the parents try and do something about it, and it didn't seem like they seemed like they were trying.
Yeah.
But he was also an adult male, and if they weren't granted guardianship over controlling him, there's just nothing in place anywhere that really takes care of something like that I'm aware of. There might be in a country, I don't know, but here you'll hear the parents tried over and over but what do? You can't have them arrested for nothing. You can't, we don't really institutionalize people anymore. And for the most part, that turns out to be good, but we can.
Not unless they break the law.
Right. And so we circle back to that, right? It has to be a big enough law break. So there's just, things escalated after his friend's death, which he may have had a part in, actually, not like intentionally, but she had previously stated he liked to grab the wheel to wrest it away from her when she was driving, so she only drove 37 miles per hour.
I wouldn't get in a car with that person, but I mean.
So whatever happened, she ended up driving off the road and into something, and so she died, and he was in it, and he was severely injured and spent time in the ER in recovery. On August 14th, 1993, someone found a note on his father's door saying, "Call the police." Searches led to his body in a nearby dammed body of water with a diving weight belt around his neck, which was declared a suicide.
Wait, his father?
Yeah. So his friend has died, and then his father
has
committed suicide.
So we're sure that that's what.
Yeah, they didn't look at it as a murder or anything. Because he actually really cared for his dad. Okay. So there's no suspicion that I saw. He left behind an additional $250,000 Australian for Bryant, who became increasingly unsettled and visibly odd to those around him and started having a drinking problem. He had no friends remaining and often tried to make friends with locals, but they were afraid of him. And they often mocked him. So finally, he became suicidal. This dude just had money flying at him.
Yeah.
Given he was losing people. So, he was suicidal until Dunblane happened. Then he felt inspired instead.
No.
So much attention was paid to Hamilton, the Dunblane shooter, with a proliferation of news stories hitting Australian airwaves, and Bryant began contemplating a horrible deed. He wanted to do something that would make him that famous.
That's awful.
He purchased weapons for cash, despite not having a license for the weapons. Because, there were gun laws in place in these places. But he was also driving without a license at this point. So
I don't think the law had any impact on his day-to-day life.
No. And it doesn't matter if you don't get caught.
Yeah.
Right? So at some point before noon on the 28th, Bryant made his way to a property known as Seascape. Years earlier, his father had tried to buy the property, but while he was getting his finances in order, the Martins purchased it. The Bryants and the Martins knew each other, and Mr. Bryant had complained for years that the Martins stole the property right out from under him with dirty dealings. Mr. Bryant had offered to buy another of the Martins' properties, but they had turned him down. So he had this utter hatred for them after that. Bryant shot the Martins, David and Nolene, sometime between midnight and 12:30 p.m. and left their bodies in the property, running into a couple who wanted to check the property out for a possible stay. Bryant turned them away rudely, then drove away in his yellow Volvo at 12:35 p.m. After a brief stop at the Martins' other property, he headed to the Port Arthur Historic Site and paid to get on site at about 1:10 p.m. He briefly had a run-in with security when he parked too close to the entrance where no one was supposed to park. So he moved his car, sat there for a while, then moved it right back after the security guard had walked away.
Okay.
The guard saw him move back, but decided not to go after him again because he was like, we're just going to keep doing this, right? The security manager then watched him walk into the Broad Arrow Cafe carrying a sports bag.
The infamous sports bag.
That's right. Bryant got some lunch and ate it outside. He sat there making random odd conversation with other diners about wasps and Japanese tourists. Haven't seen many Japanese tourists around here today, huh? Okay. All while they said he was acting nervous, he was looking around a lot. He kept looking into the cafe and out to the parking lot. Then, without warning, Bryant took a rifle out of his bag, pointed it at people at a nearby table, and fired, killing Mo Yi-ing and So Lang Chung, Malaysian tourists. Within 15 seconds of pulling his gun out, Bryant shot 17 times, killing 12 people and injuring 10 more people.
Holy crap.
15 seconds. And this is not the entirety of it.
Oh, God.
This is just this first part.
Oh, my God.
Positioned as he was, he came in through the entrance and blocked others from escaping that way. There were many heroic efforts, including a mother who threw her body over her 15-year-old daughter's body to shield her. The mother, shot in the spine and with her eardrum burst, lived, but her daughter still ended up with a gunshot to the head and died immediately. A man helping the staff, Jason Winter, saw the gunman approaching his wife and 15-month-old son, so he threw a serving tray at Bryant. Winter's father-in-law was able to get his daughter and grandson under a table, thanks to Winter's distraction of the shooter. A pair of brothers, Raymond and Kevin Sharp, were both killed when a bullet went through a friend of theirs sitting there, struck both of them. The first person was wounded, the second two died.
That's insane.
That one was crazy. And this was not the only time where a bullet went through somebody and killed somebody else in this shooting. Just high projectile, right?
Yeah.
From here, Bryant made his way to the adjoining gift shop where people had already taken cover after the volley of shots in the cafe. He shot the two women working in the gift shop, one of them 17, as well as a woman trying to get out through the exit door, which would not open, and actually 3 others had tried it while he was in the cafe. I do not know why that door wouldn't open, but nobody could get that door open. So I don't know if they had like the fire laws that we have, but I hope they do now. Because people in the gift shop could have gotten out before he got in there if that door had opened. So I don't know what the deal was. At this point, he had killed 4 people, but got distracted by movement in the cafe, so moved back to the entrance to fire back into the cafe.
Good
Jason
God.
Winter, that man whose quick thinking had saved his wife and daughter, right? Or wife and child, thought Bryant had left because there was a pause, said, "Oh, he's gone," stood up. He wasn't gone. Sadly, Bryant was still within shooting distance of him, and he was shot in the neck and chest before another shot went into his head, killing him. Bryant killed the 3 people who had originally tried to escape out the back door, unaware that one of those people, Peter Nash, was lying on top of his wife, Carolyn, to protect her. And so I'm like, how tiny was she? But his body covered her and the dude didn't know. So she survived. At this point, he pointed the gun at a man in the gift shop and pulled the trigger, only to discover he'd run out of ammunition. Imagine that man. He shot himself, I'm sure. So he went to the counter, reloaded, and walked out of the building. So that guy, he didn't try to shoot him again. Just left the magazine on top of the counter. At this point, he left behind him a total of 20 dead and 12 wounded, and he had expended 29 shots between the cafe and the gift shop. But he wasn't done. There was a bus parking lot, coaches, as I said, the coach lot. And Bryant walked toward the buses, shooting one of the drivers as the man walked along the side. A woman named Bridget Cook tried to move people to safety as others scattered, attempting to put buses between them and the shooter. Bridget took a shot to her thigh, but survived. Others tried to run for the ferry jetty, but someone screamed he was heading that way, so they ran back toward the buses. It was complete chaos, obviously. Of course it was.
Yeah.
With limited sight, these buses, right? You can't see through them. The best you could do is lay down and try and watch for feet. I mean, there's just no way to see him on the other side of the bus. A couple attempting to escape ended up in his sights, and the wife, Janet Quinn, took a shot to her back as they fled. Her husband, Neville, ran onto the jetty, but came back for her when Bryant climbed onto a bus to go after someone on it, which was shortly after he'd gone to his car to get another rifle. Yes.
So he just paused, walked out,
everybody's trying to hide and getting on the buses and stuff.
I don't know that I would have gotten on the bus, but I understand it.
Right. You think you're taking cover, you can hide, he won't see me.
But my thought is, no, he's going to get on the bus behind me and there's no fucking way out.
And that's what happened to a couple people. God. Unfortunately, Bryant had circled back and finished Janet off where she lay, injured and unable to move before the husband got back there. And as Neville approached her, Bryant got off the bus and came for him, saying, "No one gets away from me." Neville ducked at just the right moment, taking a gunshot to the neck that paralyzed him at the time, but did not kill him or result in permanent paralysis. Of course, Bryant couldn't know this, so he just kept walking. This portion of the shooting left 4 more dead and 5 more injured. In the bus parking lot, Bryant left behind the buses and got into his own car to leave the park. He pulled up behind Annette Mikac, who was carrying her 3-year-old daughter and following her 6-year-old daughter, who was running ahead of her. I don't think they knew what was going on. So they were just walking out. He slowed down and she approached the car thinking he was going to offer to help or something like that, unaware of what had occurred back at the building. So he got out, made her get on her knees, shot her in the head, and then shot both those babies.
Oh, God.
At the entryway sat a gold BMW with 4 people in it at like the toll booth that you pay to get in. Bryant blocked them in and got into an argument with one of the passengers, probably because the dude was like, "Why are you blocking us in?" Which led to the man being shot, followed by the other 3 in the car. Because the driver got out to go and confront him or something. He got shot, and then the 2 in the car got shot. Pulling their bodies from the BMW, Bryant moved his belongings into the Beamer, shot an approaching car, and drove off. He took the BMW. So that's 7 more dead with no sign of him stopping.
Where was he headed?
Well, we'll get there. Bryant headed to the Port Arthur General Store, which was a service station, and blocked a white Corolla in as they tried to leave. And of course, they have no idea.
Right.
Any of this is going on. He got out of the car holding his rifle and tried to drag the passenger, Zoe Hall, out of the passenger side. When her boyfriend, the passenger out of the passenger side. When her boyfriend, Glenn Paris, got out, Bryant forced him to crawl into the trunk of the BMW at gunpoint, locked him in, and then went back and killed Zoe.
Oh, God.
As she tried to get away. Now Bryant headed to Seascape, the original property, right? Where he had killed the owners and left them. With the hostage now in his trunk, he shot at multiple cars as he passed them, luckily only wounding the occupants. There was a whole thing with this. He shot at one car and they pulled over, and then shot at another car, and that car, and the women from the first car were like trying to flag them down. They didn't know what had happened, and then they realized they were injured and they circled back and they got them and took them to safety. So more people helping people. They were able to call the police, and that's probably what led them to figure out where he was at Seascape, where an 18-hour siege occurred, ending when he set the guest house on fire and tried to flee. Now, I looked at pictures. It was pretty isolated. I don't know where he thought he was fleeing to. It was surrounded by cops. They thought he had hostages, and he did technically have Glenn, but when they got in, they discovered he had killed Glenn already at some point early in the siege.
Oh.
And the man was just... hopes for Glenn. I know. Nope. He was cuffed to a stair railing, so he just shot him and left him there to, like, bleed out or whatever. I listened to a call with the negotiators with him, where he sat there talking about how, yes, he had multiple hostages. And Shirley said, it's like a Hawaiian vacation in here, and I'm making them eggs and making them some eggs and bacon, and like this whole bizarre, surreal conversation with this man being completely cheerful and talking like they're having a great time, and he's making them some food now, when in point of fact, there were 3 dead bodies in that building with him. Ultimately, he murdered 35 people and injured 23. His youngest victim was 3. His oldest 2 were 72. He was given 35 life sentences, as well as additional, like 20-something additional years for the charges that weren't murder, and will never be eligible for parole. Because he kept asking about his body count and seemed excited by the damage he'd done and his newfound fame, like the whole time into the police station, all of this, how many did I kill? Tell me about who I killed.
That's just so sick.
So the prime minister ensured he was not allowed to watch TV. So he couldn't see his news. I was like, that's petty and I love it.
Yep.
Fuck you, dude. Australia had already been trying to put stricter gun controls in place, but it hit resistance from Tasmania, where this occurred.
Oh.
And in fact, like, I don't know, is it Parliament there? Anyway, one of the people had stormed out, and he said, well, it will take a massive shooting in Tasmania for them to ever allow us to get these gun laws passed.
And they got one.
After the shooting, legislation was pushed through. Prime Minister John Howard put together the National Firearms Agreement, which restricted private ownership of semi-automatic rifles and shotguns and pump-action shotguns, as well as creating a 28-day waiting period and required licensing and registration. Buyers have to have a valid reason, which does not include self-defense. A buyback program brought in 643,000 guns and paid out $350 million. And the way they paid for that was with a temporary, what did it say, like Medicare levy? So like a little bit of extra off the top paid for this buyback thing. Wow. And then once that was done, that extra money was done. A new gift shop and restaurant were built, and the old one was made into a memorial garden. This is considered the worst mass shooting in Australia. My sources, Smithsonian Magazine, BBC News, and Wikipedia. Those were Dunblane. And then for Port Arthur, Britannica, Wikipedia, ABC News, NBC News, National Museum, Australia. And for the record, it was bipartisan what went through for the legislation in Australia. At that point, they all went, oh shit, we have to do something.
Wow. You mean they worked together for the good of the people in their country?
Yeah, and actually it was a conservative who passed that first legislation in Dunblane. Well, the UK.
Yeah.
And then the new PM came in, and it was partially, I think, because of this and all other stuff that brought that new group in, and that's the one where it got stricter.
Working together for the good of the people you represent?
Yeah, I read all kinds of articles, and I watched news programs with some of the survivors of, like, the Dunblane shooting, for example, and stuff like that. And their minds were just blown that people won't work together just to do the bare minimum in America. And there was a whole thing where it was the Florida school where the kids became like really outspoken advocates, and where the people in the grown-ups that had survived at Dunblane were contacting them, did videos and stuff, and sent them support. And at that point, Obama was using the Dunblane shooting as, look what can be done when everybody works together. And it didn't matter. But, yeah.
That's a soapbox I cannot get on right now.
Like, even just the basics and having that. Because here's the thing. From the sound of it, in Australia, all of the states and territories have their own governance like we do, right? They have their local government and they have then the federal government. And the local governments worked with the federal government to get this passed. I mean, that's why they couldn't pass it, right? Because Tasmania was like, fuck you. And then there was another one, I forget which territory, that also was like, no, you can't take our guns away. And I have a picture that I'll post of PM, was it John Howard? I believe so. I think. There speaking to this massive rally of pro-gun people. And you can see under his dress jacket that he's got a bulletproof vest on to talk to them because he was afraid. But he still did it. He still stood in front of those people and talked about it. So, yeah.
Wow.
And there are still people who try and get those overturned there. Just for the record, there are still pro-gun people in all these places.
Yes.
And I have since seen crimes. They did have statistics. I decided it was long enough. I didn't need to go into all of this stuff. They had statistics of how suicide by gunshot had gone down and violent crimes, but they do still occur. And people do still have weapons. And there are those people who didn't sell them back, right? I mean, obviously,
yes.
Those people who are against it wouldn't have sold theirs back.
Well, and we're hearing, because there was just a shooting, was it in Australia or New Zealand? Just like in the last few days.
I don't know.
It wasn't I don't want to misspeak. I don't believe it was a mass shooting, but it was a unhinged person shot some people. And here, because they do have those laws, so the pundits here are going, see, there's no point in passing laws because this still happens.
Right, but we have one every 2 weeks on average in America.
Yeah, not every 20 years.
Right.
Yeah. Which is not to say Australia has violence every 20 years, but...
No, and here's the thing. Scotland, even less so than Australia. I mean, they already... This mentality already existed. There are already people doing this, but even then, when we look at historically here, historically Scotland, historically Australia, there were already fewer of these shootings occurring there. There is a mentality here in America that makes it different. And I did read article, and you know how I like to get into the psychological of that. But again, I knew it was too long. But it's very interesting to read about that and the differences. And they weren't facing something that was written into a constitution, which we are. And that makes it very different as well. I mean, there's a lot of major differences between those countries. But just, we need to figure out why so frequently it's white males who have to take other people out with them before committing suicide. And Martin Bryant had no interest in suicide at that point. Like, after that, once he decided he was going to do this, his suicidal urges were gone, right? And he was all about just the body count and becoming famous. So they called his very much a copycat murder of Dunblane.
That's just hideous. Both of those are just hideous. But, you know, now when you go someplace, I mean, do you go any place? I know you don't. It's not like you're out at a theme park every weekend. But when you go someplace big where there are a lot of people, do you not think about
Right.
that?
And you think about, well, where would I go?
Yeah. Like, it's like, where would they come from? Where would I go?
After the Aurora shooting at the theater for Batman, right? Like, it took me a really long time. And even now still, sometimes I'll randomly go, oh, where would I go if somebody come in? Because the theater is a fishbowl like no other.
Yeah.
Because you're seated, you're climbing up high. The exits are both down on the bottom.
Yeah, the bleacher
At most places. There's Cinemark has some where you can exit at the top and the bottom. And that's maybe something more theaters should have started doing after that.
Possibly.
But, yeah, I mean, it's very much become part of the mentality in America. Like, what would I do? Where would I go? Where are the exits?
Yeah. Keep an eye on the exits. Where are the people? Where does it look like there's a place to hide?
Right. And now you have mayhem for us.
Yes, thank God. I have some ridiculous mayhem. I'm going to talk today about Adolphe Sax. Adolphe Sax. His given name was Antoine Joseph Sax, known as Adolphe. He was born on November 6, 1814, in what is now Belgium.
Is he Adolphe? Is that a completely separate nickname, or
it was a completely separate?
Okay, I was like, that's weird.
Everybody in his family was something Joseph Sax.
Okay.
I don't know why, even his mother. So he was one of 11 children. That's a lot of kids. So, and full credit to Thing One for bringing this to my attention. Because she goes, oh my God, do you know about the guy who invented the saxophone? And I'm like, no. And she goes, it is pure mayhem. I was like, send it on. I will look at it. So Sax's parents, Charles Joseph and Marie Joseph, were musical instrument designers and makers who made several changes to the French horn. So what I don't think people understand is that I think a lot of people look at musical instruments as very static. This is what a French horn is. This is what the French horn has always been. It was invented, it was this, and it will always be this. But back then, no, if you didn't like the way an instrument sounded, you just made a new one or you improved the old one. Okay. I had no idea. And I do want to, you improve it, you redesign it, you make something totally new. So I do want to state for the record, this might still be going on and I am just way too ignorant to be aware of it. I don't know anything about, I'm not going to pretend I know anything about musical instruments.
I know somebody who 3D printed a guitar recently and is learning guitar on the 3D printed guitar.
Wow.
Yeah.
But why?
For funsies.
Okay. I'm just like, but we have
because he's a geek.
Okay, that makes sense to me. But I'm just like, you could go to any pawn shop and just get a guitar.
They're not cheap, though. Even probably, I don't know. Maybe
I have no idea.
Shop, but
again, musically ignorant here. Also, the military used to be really involved with the development of musical instruments.
Okay.
So, Adolphe followed in his parents' footsteps from an early age. When he was 15, he entered 2 flutes and a more playable bass clarinet of his own design into a competition. This precociousness would affect his later career. But first, it's just a miracle that this child ever got to be 15 years old. First of all, in 1814, he was one of 11 children. So, when you think of the early 1800s, you might think about the lack of modern medicine and dentistry. You know, a bad tooth could kill you. There weren't immunizations. They didn't have antibiotics.
When one wonders if there were 11 living, how many had been lost?
Exactly. I found a reference to that, but I couldn't find anything about. I couldn't find a solid number. This is a time when doctors didn't even universally accept that it was a good idea to wash your hands in between patients. Germs?
What are those?
Yeah. No. So, he just had really bad luck and somewhat negligible parents. Negligent. Not negligible. Negligent. I even wrote negligent. And my mouth just decided to go with the wrong word. So, at the age of 2, he fell down 2 to 3 flights of stairs, striking his head on a rock at the bottom so hard they initially thought he was dead. And he was in a coma for a week.
Wow.
That's when he was 2. At the age of 3, he drank a bowl of sulfuric acid mixed with water, which is white, I imagine, because he mistook it for milk.
Why was there, when you got 11 kids, you don't put out sulfuric acid in a bowl?
One would think. He later ingested, not a quick learner, this boy, he later ingested white lead, copper oxide, and arsenic, and survived them all. In addition, he swallowed a needle. Any one of these things. And he would be, I don't know how this happened, but I saw a couple of references to the fact that he would sleep in a room that had varnished furniture in it. And they would have to drag him out of the room to wake him up because he'd succumbed to the fumes.
I feel like when they talked about their child, they just shook their head.
Yes. He was in a workshop where gunpowder exploded and it threw him across the room and burned him. He fell, how this happens, I don't know. He fell into a cast iron frying pan and burned his side. I don't know how you fall. Look in your face.
I'm just trying to see it in my head. And
I'm like, were you swinging in the rafters? A roof tile fell and struck him in the head. And at the age of 10, he was struck in the head by a cobblestone, fell into the river, and narrowly avoided drowning. Someone jumped in and saved him. So his mother once said he was too unlucky to live.
Oh, God. Actually, he's lucky enough.
Yeah. The neighbors called him Little Sax the Ghost. Because even the neighbors were like, fuck, how does this one keep bouncing back?
They're like, oh, look, there's Adolphe again, just nearly dead.
He looks pretty good. So
he's breathing.
Stay clear. Who knows where there might be a rain
They look
of frogs.
up in the sky, look around.
So he was, needless to say, he was very scarred. I mean, his head was misshapen and he's scarred all over, burn scars all over his head and his body. He studied at the Royal Conservatory of Brussels and he continued to experiment with new instrument designs. At the age of 24, he patented his bass clarinet design. However, I never knew the world of symphonies and musicians was so full of drama. It's
of course it is.
Oh my
it's
God.
Artistic people.
Yes. Did
we not know how fucking dramatic creatives are?
Yes. I guess I'm just thinking of symphonies and classical music and how it's so staid. And no, not at all. There was a clarinetist of the day, renowned clarinetist, who threw a shit fit. And he threatened to quit the orchestra if he had to play the new instrument. So what did Adolphe do? Challenged him to a clarinet duel and won.
How do you do that? Do you slap him with the clarinet instead of a glove?
Well, musical duels were a thing. Who knew? I kept stopping.
They still are. Battle of the bands.
Yes. He engaged in them often to prove the superiority of his instruments. And he usually won. That was the thing.
He should have gone up against the devil in Georgia.
He should have. In 1841, at the age of 27, and this was all accomplished while he was really fairly young, he went to the Belgian National Convention and introduced the saxophone, which I was surprised to find out. The saxophone was designed to address a specific orchestral problem, which was the woodwind instruments were being overwhelmed by the brass instruments. Who knew? I am the person who falls asleep that's why we stopped going to the symphony. I make it through the first piece and I just conk right out in the second piece. Oh my gosh. It's dark, it's warm, it's comfortable, it's soothing music. And it's soft and soothing. So anyhow, although the saxophone was praised at this convention, Adolphe wasn't awarded first prize because he was too young. And where would he go from here? If we give you this... Yes.
The number of times I've heard, though, that in a competition where, well, they would have won, but they were so young, we figured we'd give it to somebody older who didn't have as much.
Who didn't have as much talent.
Surely they'll win in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Incidentally, one of his competitors kicked and broke the prototype instrument. They were nasty. It was a nasty competition.
Orchestra wars.
Yes. In 1842, Adolphe has had it. He goes to Paris, where he thought it would be easier to gain acceptance for the saxophone and his other instruments. Not so much. He thought he would go and instantly become famous. It didn't work that way. He was broke and discouraged most of the time he was there. But then he remembered what his father had always done. His father supplied instruments to the military. Mm-hmm. So he made a deal to provide musical instruments to the French military band. He started getting some recognition. He played for the king and queen and their family, king and queen of France. And the plan was to revitalize the musical arm of the French military. That's a thing. Mm-hmm. I kept going, that's a thing? I'm woefully uneducated on some things. The director of the Academy of Military Music, Michel Carafa, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, had his own plan and publicly criticized Adolphe's plan. So you know where this is going. Another battle of the bands. Uh-huh. So, on April 22nd, 1844, two 25-piece orchestras were scheduled to battle it out in Paris, in a big open space in Paris. Apparently, approximately 20,000 people showed up to hear the contest. And remember, this is before cell phones. This is before everything. So yeah, 20,000 people crowded in. Carafa didn't play fair. He paid members of Adolphe's orchestra to not show up. Adolphe himself showed up with two different instruments strapped to his body. I know. It's like a gunslinger. Ready to play. And he won the day, although there is some speculation that the instrument he created, instruments, plural, in the saxophone family were easier to hear in those unamplified days than the other musical instruments.
Fair enough. Then he still created something that overcame that issue. So,
which I'm thinking if it's a military band, you might want it to be louder. That might be a good thing. So he won the crowd that day, but the other musicians were still out to get him. And his childhood run of luck seemed to come back with a vengeance. So the Association of United Instrument Makers, which was an international organization formed just to oppose Adolphe and his instruments. There were lawsuits. They piled lawsuits on him and patent claims against him because if he was in court, he wouldn't be creating more instruments. Also, he had to sue some people who would produce saxophones and say they invented it when it was his patent. When it was just, his employees were paid to steal his specialized tools. Some of them were paid to leave work. One of his employees was accidentally stabbed to death by someone who was paid to kill him.
Well, I was like, how are you accidentally stabbed?
Mistaken identity.
Wow.
A bomb was placed under his bed, but it detonated too early due to a faulty wiring detonator.
It's just his luck still happening, though. Like, I know he's called unlucky, but I feel like I have 3 brothers. They get into all kinds of shit. That's not actually unlucky. That's being male and young. And no, he was super lucky because he kept surviving all the things.
Yeah, exactly. So something that I found greatly amusing, and I couldn't find anything more than a sentence worth, the Pope hated the saxophone, hated the instrument. I'm like, but why?
Here's an indication of how much I care what the Pope thinks. I'm actually going to cross those because it's negative amounts. My fingers there.
So in 1848, the King of France was deposed. And because of Adolphe's strong association with the royal family, his instruments were banned. But at this time in France, you just basically waited it out. So in 1852, Napoleon III became dictator and restored the saxophone. And at a military honors presentation, Adolphe's 12 saxotubas overwhelmed the music coming from 1,500 musicians from 30 regiments.
Saxotubas.
I will post a photo. The saxotuba is taller than the man playing it. Wearing it, playing it. I don't know which is the...
It's wearing him.
It is wearing him. I don't know where he found musicians willing to play these instruments. Because the saxotuba looks like a fucking weapon. I mean, it's huge. It's tall. It's unwieldy. It looks heavy as fuck. Mm-hmm. In 1853, Adolphe was afflicted with a cancerous tumor on his lip. And despite the best treatment he could afford at the time, it continued to grow until it actually impacted his ability to eat and then his ability to breathe. He was offered experimental surgery that might save his life, but would require removing half his jaw. So he refused it. And he did something that was really controversial at the time. He found an Indian doctor who treated him with herbal extracts. And it took time, but the tumor began to shrink and eventually disappeared. So in 1894, at the age of 79, Adolphe succumbed to pneumonia. At that time, he held 35 patents for instruments and had sketches and ideas for the development of several more. The Saxophones, right, was a gigantic steam-powered instrument. He also had ideas for a saxocannon, which was a weapon that would fire a mortar bullet 11 yards wide, powerful enough to take out an entire building with a single round.
And there we have the military connections to instruments.
But still, I could find
how's that a saxa anything?
Just because of his last name.
Did it play some music while it happened?
Possibly. I could find no sketches of the saxocannon or the saxophones. I looked.
Oh, yeah.
And you get some weird shit when you put saxophones. Get some really weird visual images there. So the saxophone came to the U.S. in the 1860s, but it didn't really get popular until jazz came along and embraced it. While and here's something else I didn't know.
I do enjoy a jazzy saxophone.
Right? The saxophone remains somewhat shunned by the world of classical music, although perhaps it is that the musicians haven't been skilled enough to control the instrument.
Oh, burn. You got your little dig there.
I did.
Burn.
My little burn at the end. I just was like, how did this guy even grow up? He had so much luck. Anything should have killed him.
I will say, with my limited experience with orchestral such, like, there are some elitist.
Yes.
And even I was part of the National League of American Penwomen as a writer, and despite the name, it was also for composers.
Oh.
And for visual artists.
Creatives.
Yes. Well, but not all. So they were fighting to get, for music, it was just composers.
Oh.
It wasn't, say, musicians. And they were fighting to get it so musicians could be part of it. And then they were also fighting so that there could be acting, like stage play.
Oh.
Type actors could be part of it. So, yeah, there was a lot. They were like, we are excluding certain creatives. And it was interesting because the whole thing started because women were, of course, excluded from press clubs and stuff like that. And so this got started for that. But then they became elitist, right? But yeah, just a lot of elitist bullshit in musical stuff.
There is. So my sources, I didn't have a ton. Time Magazine, Wikipedia, and I swear, if you haven't looked this up, Puppet History. I love Puppet History. That was Lucy was like, watch this. And so they did, and the puppets are amazing. They did make a puppet of one of his instruments, which is just ridiculous. Completely and totally ridiculous. But, yeah, so I'm glad I did this one because it was absolute mayhem. Mm-hmm. And the tumor thing got a lot of attention at the time because, you know, why are you trusting this Indian doctor? And what are these weird herbal extracts he's giving you? But they worked.
I was part of a group that my dad pulled me into for CBD and THC. There's different ratios that do different things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, there's a lot of cancer patients who've seen improvement with specific ratios. Mm-hmm. So I thought a lot of stuff on there, personal experience from people. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's not medical studies, so. Because heaven forbid, once it gets declared an illegal or a bad drug, that anybody actually do. We are, of course, now. Ketamine and psilocybin and all of that. But there's still a lot of people who go up against that and fight it. So,
I don't
understand these are some of these natural substances.
And some of them can help people that nothing else will.
Right? In a less destructive way than, say, chemo and radiation. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. All right. Oh, I should say that if anybody wanted, Wikipedia actually had a shot-by-shot of the Port Arthur. If anybody wants to go through and hear. Oh. I had a list of all the names on there, but those 35 names was a lot. And they do have the list, the names and ages and how they were killed and all of that. If you want to go on there and get more into the nitty gritty of it. I could have done just Port Arthur and put more detail in it, but the two are really, I feel, closely tied together. Yes,
and now I see why.
Yeah.
So that absolutely makes sense, especially since he was inspired. Inspired seems such a bad word to use, but
yeah.
That was what...
It's what happened.
What gave him the idea.
So, just this dude without much mental capacity went, oh, it's a great idea, and it fulfills everything I've said I wanted to do, like shooting people and becoming famous.
And I have all the money.
You already have money. Just go live and leave people alone. No. Okay.
Well, isn't that a motto?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
heaven forbid they not put and force themselves on other people. All right, guys. We'll talk at you next week.
Yes, we will be back with something else fascinating.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you later. Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.